I will make mistakes. I have no doubt that you will call them out for good reason. Because this House has rules, it has traditions, and it's on those traditions that our Athenian democracy is founded.
This may very well be one of the biggest FAFO, like F around, find out moments in Canadian history. Also, you would think that Mark Carney was indeed the one who was a drama teacher with this speech. So we're going to pick it apart, go through all of the details, because there's a very dark underbelly to it. And then let's compare that, of course, to Pierre Poilievre, who spoke to the press just yesterday. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Be sure to follow, subscribe, comment your thoughts down below, and like the video. That helps the YouTube algorithm push it out to more people. First, I wanted to show you this just because I thought it was kind of funny. So this is Mark Carney yesterday.
This is the room. This is the room. Nope. This is real work. This is real work. This is the room that won our party a strong mandate at the most crucial time in our nation's history. 8.6 million votes. Who's counting? 8.6 million votes. The largest, the most votes in Canadian history.
I don't know who's counting, but could it possibly be Liberal staffers? Does anybody else remember this attack ad against Pierre Poilievre? Or, I don't know, is the short-term memory actually that bad?
How did you like our rally yesterday?
Did you see it? The place was packed.
Very big. How many people do you think were there?
I mean, the one we had today, you missed a beauty.
When was the last time you had that in Kingston?
This is a record crowd. They've never had a crowd like that in the history of this place.
That was nice of them in this rain.
It was almost raining.
Couple of quick things to cover before we dive into the real meat and bones of today's episode. We do have a new House Speaker, MP Francis Scarpellegia. I don't know if I said that right or wrong. I didn't have time to check the pronunciation for it before I started filming this video. Oops, I'm human. But he has been elected as the new House Speaker. That voting began this morning at 8 a.m. and wrapped up quite quickly, actually. And he's actually a Liberal. So that goes to, there you go. It's not Elizabeth May, thank God.
A second piece of advice for new members: only speak when you have something intelligent to say.
Both Mark Carney and Andrew Scheer had their opportunity to say something, obviously, today as House resumed. And it was pretty weird. Andrew Scheer took no issues at all in roasting the hypocrisy of the Liberals.
But of course, he wasn't the last politician to try to be on both sides of a contentious issue. And I dare say we may find some Liberal MPs voting for things that they were very recently voting against.
And Mark Carney said something kind of weird. Let's dive into that first and foremost. I'm going to chime in intermittently as we get through it.
And I'd like to thank Canadians, Mr. Speaker, for the trust that they have put in this government, but in all members of this great House. Hear, hear. Mr. Speaker, I have much to learn from the members of this great House. I will make mistakes. I have no doubt that you will call them out for good reason. Because this House has rules, it has traditions, and it's on those traditions that our Athenian democracy is founded.
I've seen a ton of people saying, oh, Mark Carney said he's going to make mistakes, blah, blah, blah. To be frank with you, though, I actually appreciate that. I do, I'll be honest, because as a conservative, did I want Poilievre to win? Absolutely. Do I think our country is probably not on the right track for the next 4 years? Heck yes, I do, and we'll get into that way more in just a little bit here. But I also really don't want Mark Carney to completely fail, because that's our future on the line. Our future is in his and his government's hands, and anybody else who they may or may not make deals with along the way. So I want the Conservatives to be leading us, but I also want Mark Carney to succeed. And I do appreciate a little bit of humility, however genuine it is, because yes, he has no idea what he's doing. This is his first time ever in a situation like this, and having to be held accountable by the absolute masterminds that are in the Conservative Conservative Party is going to be incredibly entertaining for all of us, and it's going to be incredibly challenging for him. So I appreciate him saying that. Another point, though, that I just thought, I don't know, like it's just kind of weird, but I'm probably looking into it too much, is he says our Athenian democracy. And one thing, yes, Athenian democracy is the foundation of which, you know, the modern democratic right was founded. However, lots of differences with that because, you know, Athenian democracy, initially, it had very direct participation. It was mostly kind of a gamble, like a random selection of who was actually going to be in parliament, which is a little bit different, a lot a bit different than what we have. It was only voted on by male citizens, and the judicial system was citizen juries.
Yes, we are Athens. They are Rome.
We're in the golden age of Athens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You have my support.
CBC watcher on X wrote, while not all citizens were equally empowered, Rome was more willing to grant citizenship to foreigners and conquered peoples than Athens. Liberals just prorogued to avoid a scandal, delayed democracy to swap out their leader, and have just opted to avoid the Reform Act. This point by Carney is still very much up for debate. And then as a Globe and Mail pointed out in a Saturday editorial, democracy is messy, but the Liberals make it murky. So yes, House is back in session for a very short period of time. They did not do question period today, which isn't that shocking, to be honest with you. Disappointing considering how it's been a long time since we've had one of those, but alrighty. And in other news, you are going to be hearing a lot less of the NDP because they have not been granted official party status. That has got to be the epitome of FAFO, because you quite literally destroyed what your party was in order to prop up Trudeau and the Liberals, some may say in order for Singh to get his pension. And then now what? Like, you guys are actually really screwed. But you know what? The thing about NDP and how much they have fallen, it hurts everybody based on how our voting system works here in Canada, because I would argue that one of the biggest reasons why Conservatives lost in some areas was due to the lack of vote splitting that would have normally happened between Liberal and NDP. And then due to the amount of vote splitting that happened between Conservatives and PPC. So the way that our system works, the fact that there's no NDP, they're not party status, which means they're going to have much less time to ask questions. You're honestly really not going to hear from them. Like, how frequently do you hear from Elizabeth May and the Greens? It's pretty rare.
We are going to be very, very busy in the next few weeks. But we are going to be very, very busy in the next few months. We are going to be very, very busy in the next few years. We're going to have to do things previously thought impossible at speeds not seen in generations.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Carney keeps saying things like this. Like, he keeps using this really weird God complex language while saying nothing. And Pierre Poilievre very accurately called that out in his press conference about this, because you can say whatever the heck you want, bud. What you do is a very, very different story.
It's not enough to say you want to build. The government must remove the laws, taxes, and rules that stand in the way. And that's why Conservatives are proposing practical and real removal of obstacles. End the industrial carbon tax, the energy caps, the electric vehicle mandates, the No New Pipelines law, the West Coast shipping ban, and more. If the government agrees to these changes, we will move as early as the spring to pass them all. They have our word. Let's remove the obstacles. Let's harvest our resources. Let's make Canada truly independent.
As Danielle Smith put it, she says, there has been a lot of promising talk by the federal government this past week. Now, let's see some action. Axe the oil and gas cap and net zero power regulations, agree to work with Alberta on a corridor to Canada's northwest coast that includes an Alberta bitumen pipeline along with a tanker ban carve-out for that same oil. Albertans will be listening to hear these firm commitments in the throne speech, hoping it doesn't disappoint. Too much at stake for the future of this country. I don't know if she's going to get her wish because it's not looking too good.
Do you plan to introduce legislation to repeal the consumer carbon tax? Look, that will have to be done eventually. We want to remove, the carbon tax has been removed. It's at zero.
Well, it's been zeroed. It's not the same thing.
So, it's a latent piece of legislation. I don't know if you've seen the statutes of Canada. There are a lot of laws on the books that either aren't applied anymore or are simply ignored, maybe even forgotten. But the carbon tax is absolutely gone. And we'll make sure that that's made very clear to Canadians in due course.
Well, the reason why I ask about that is because, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, the criticism raised by the Conservatives when it was, zeroed was that essentially leaving the possibility open for a time when we are not in a crisis or when your government doesn't feel it is as unpopular as the new Prime Minister has deemed it to be, because you and your colleagues spent years, almost 6 years in fact, saying it was a very vital policy instrument. So there is no chance, you're saying, of that consumer carbon tax ever being resurrected under a Mark Carney government?
Let me be very clear. Mark Carney has been very clear. There is absolutely no intention to go back to a consumer carbon tax.
And when you say that in due course, you mean at one point you do plan to repeal that legislation?
Well, we will absolutely be making it very clear to Canadians that there is no plan to return to a carbon tax. None, zero.
But what does that mean, other than you saying that?
Well, you'll understand that on a very serious level, it's important for me to not speculate about the contents of legislation before it's presented in the House. So if and when that legislation were to be presented, I think that that Canadians would find a reassurance that the carbon tax no longer is part of the climate framework.
You're right that you wouldn't be able to disclose the contents, but you can, and your government has in the past signaled that you intend to introduce something legislatively to that effect. You're not being clear.
I think I've been pretty clear that the net effect for all consumers is there will be no carbon tax. We have no intention of returning to the carbon tax. It is not part of the climate change policy mix for this government.
Well, I have a hard time believing that the Liberal government would suddenly bring back the consumer carbon tax. Who knows, but I have a hard time believing they would do that. However, what we do know that they're doing is maintaining the industrial carbon tax, which instead of consumer tax, we will just not actually know what's being targeted, except that everything is going to cost a lot more. That's going to be what happens. But don't worry, everybody, because despite that, which is going to make us super, super competitive, it's going to make us leapfrog over all of the other nations. Melanie Joly says that, we got this. And I want you to really pay attention to the words that she is using to describe the situation before we dive into a very scary message from Mark Carney that does the exact same, and then I will break it all down for you, because this is like 101, you're about to enter communism.
Really attracting the best talent in the world. We have an opportunity that we've never seen since the Vietnam War to attract the best and the brightest, particularly coming from south of the border, and we will make sure that we seize this opportunity.
The world is being reorganized through economic blocks. And because of the rules of trade being yet rewritten, we need to, as the new Canadian industry minister, we need to do the job to attract investments, to attract talent. And there is more than ever a global competition to do that. Now, what is going on right now is that there's lots of uncertainty, but we will continue to face that uncertainty. Yeah. And so our goal is to have these conversations with people in the business sector that are able to invest in Canada. You saw President Trump in the Gulf states, going around and really announcing investments for your country, for the US. Well, many of us will be doing that for our country. Now, we also think that we need to be aligning these economic blocks, and Canada can be extremely useful, being the biggest client of the US, to the American people, the American administration. And meanwhile, we have to bear in mind,
I just can't fathom being in the mental space where your government did this. Your government, you did this. You were all a part of it. You get voted back in. And now you're like, dang, I know that we've actually been pushing all of our natural born talent out with our high taxes, with the monopolies, with how awful it is to find a job, and we've been replacing them with low wage, minimal skill workers. We've been totally screwing up their lives so that we can temporarily inflate our GDP per capita. And now we want to attract the best and brightest from America. Honey, Americans that are the actual best and brightest are not coming to Canada because it doesn't make any sense. You have Canadians fleeing to America, Americans staying in America.
When we expose liberal failures, when we argue about policies, we don't do it just to hold the government to account. We do it because we want things to get better. When we act as a government in waiting, we do it to provide the hope that things can and will get better in a future conservative government.
I wanted to quickly show you this. I've seen this trending online. Melanie Joly, I guess she goes up to speak to Mark Carney. He doesn't even look at her, actually. And he it looks like he shoos her away or something. I'm not sure if people are reading into this too much, but I did want to say it's kind of weird how they're sitting here in the House of Commons and Melanie Joly is spinning a cord around her finger like she's bored, spinning a toy. And then she kind of goes up to try to speak to Mark Carney. He shoos her away and she goes back like a little kid who just got rejected and just keeps sitting by herself and spinning this toy. It just, everything about it was just really weird.
But in both these cases, I think these are leftovers from the Trudeau era that should have been left over when it came to making this cabinet.
Now, keeping what Melanie Joly said just a little while ago about the greatest opportunity since the Vietnam War, I really want you to pay attention to that language and more so pay attention to Mark Carney's language here that is incredibly dystopian and incredibly calculated, and there is a plan behind what he is saying, and I'll tell you what that is after we get through this.
A world that's more dangerous and divided, the most so since the end of the Second World War. The biggest transformation of the global trading system since the fall of the Berlin Wall. The reality of the impact of our long-standing weak productivity that's making life less affordable for Canadians and is beginning to strain our government finances and starting to put at risk the social programs on which Canadians rely. These are the challenges we must face and turn into opportunities. Opportunities to give Canadians the Canada that they deserve. Opportunities to transform our economy to be the strongest in the G7. Opportunities to build new partnerships with reliable allies. Opportunities, indeed duties to secure our sovereignty and make our communities safe.
Now, this is something that we all really need to pay attention to, and that is his framing, his branding, the words that he is using because they mean something and they have an impact, and they likely played a huge role in winning him this election. This is classic crisis framing and messianic branding. And messianic branding, by the way, that's basically like God complex. I say that about Mark Carney all the time, and it's one of the reasons why I have a very hard time believing that he is actually a devout Catholic, because if you were, you would not be speaking of yourself in such a way. You would not have that boastful, prideful, I'm the God, I'm the Savior complex in which he describes everything it is that he does. So first and foremost, pay attention to how much he exaggerates the scale of all of these current problems. Like he is comparing Canada's economic strain to World War II, Melanie Joly with the Vietnam War, or even the fall of the Berlin Wall, as Carney just said. That is unreal, and that is extreme manipulation, which governments will do and have done in history to justify a radical intervention and to justify really horrible things happening to their people because of the crisis, because it makes you feel unstable, it makes you feel uncertain, it makes you feel anxious about the future and hopeless. But he is the God and he will help you. That is how he frames all of this. And this is also an extreme case of savior complex marketing by saying, essentially the world is crumbling. It's the worst we've seen in decades. Man, wars haven't had consequences as grave as these from our own policies, which to anybody rational, you would think, okay, great, so we should really vote you guys out then. But unfortunately, savior complex is a very real thing, because Mark Carney positions it as, thankfully, I'm here to save you from what's coming. So he speaks a lot in, these crazy abstractions. Oh, we're going to be the strongest in the G7. We're securing our sovereignty, transforming our economy. And those are all things where you say these words and they make people feel a type of way, but there is absolutely no clear or even actionable policy changes to achieve what would actually need to happen if the crisis was as bad as he claims that it is. All of this language is meant to appear as though he is the adult in the room. He is the powerful one, without actually providing any details, without providing any actual outcomes with his ideas. And I've read his book Values. I actually just ordered a physical copy of it so that I can highlight it and read it on the show for you guys. You know I love you when. But his ideas have been terrible. GFANS, total failure. Net zero, total failure. ESG, total failure. But he appears as though, while using his credentials, as though he is the one who's going to help us. Meanwhile, his ideas have failed, every single one of them. His book Values is a nightmare. Like, there's nothing in there that is actually more than a theory or an idea. And it makes sense, because he had actually said in writing his book Values, if I'm remembering the quote correctly, that it was that book where he was inspired by Karl Marx. And Karl Marx is somebody who wrote a lot of crazy, crazy things that then, many years after he died, were applied by what then became Stalin, what then became, the North Korea, what happened there. And it was so to me, the way that I envision Mark Carney is that he is somebody who really wants to be remembered, who really wants to make a global impact on the world. Mark Carney is an activist. He is a radical. And he is trying to push that onto Canadian people who were none the wiser, because most people don't do their research, unlike you, of course. But I do also want to say, like the comparisons of Canada's situation today, like the Berlin Wall, like World War II, there is absolutely no comparison outside of those that are self-serving or superficial, because Canada's economic issues, yes, they are very serious. They're not even remotely comparable to wartime devastation or authoritarian regimes and collapses and what that does to the world. So the words that he is using are completely designed to manufacture urgency and not at all to inform. And they're also just not even valid. Like, that is insane talk, buddy. And most importantly from all of this is the simple fact that all of the other countries who are doing exceptionally well right now, what have they done? They have unleashed what works in their countries. Canada, on the other hand, has muzzled all of those industries, shamed all of those industries and the people in them, the people who support them, to try to test out this idea that doesn't work. There is data showing you that it does not work. Why doesn't Canada just do the same as every other country then? You really want to be like a superpower? Unleash it, baby. That's all you got to do. It's actually quite easy, but Mark Carney isn't doing that. No, he's oh yeah, our productivity is so scary and low. It's just like all of these other scary things that have happened in the world, but he doesn't address at all how many of the policies that put us in this situation, because it was not always like this, were supported and proposed by his party. So, you caused it, and you aren't actually doing anything to repeal it. You are not repealing the carbon tax industrially. You are not reversing censorship bills, CRTC censorship bills, C11, C18. You're not cutting government funding. You are not going to cut back on reckless spending. Instead, Mark Carney is going on vacation for 3 months while Canadians are forced to deal with the remnants of what his party has done before they come and continue to do even more damage on all of us. And I know that there is no way I am the only person who is so sick and tired of this, because once you see it, you see it. You can point it out from a mile away, but it takes a little while to be able to understand what's going on here. But Mark Carney is emotionally manipulating Canadians to give him power by creating a great sense of doom while offering nothing to fix it. other than vague promises and elitist platitudes. He is this great technocratic savior, but he has no political courage or desire to reverse what isn't working or to even debate it. So this is all optics, zero accountability. And as I've said from day one, he is trying to win by default, not by merit. And he is campaigning on fear, and it's working. So that means we have a lot of work to do in order to gently push people towards the reality that they are in, because this has nothing to do with the Berlin Wall. This has nothing to do with multiple wars. This is not even remotely close to that. So many of these problems could be so easily fixed almost overnight if you just reversed liberal policies, which they have no desire in doing. They just want to continue to manipulate the situation instead. Awesome. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Subscribe, follow, like, share, comment your thoughts down below. I was also very recently targeted in I guess it would be a media smear campaign about me and the misinformation I'm so busy spreading over here. Unfortunately for them, though, I too once worked in media for a very long period of time, and I know all of the tricks up their sleeves and how they will manipulate you and mislead you into thinking something that is simply not true, and also how easy it is to fall into that belief. So I have no problem at all fact-checking their fact-check on Jasmine Lane and Over Opinionated, which we are going to be talking about tomorrow.